Captain Robert Bob Shoens was a B-17 pilot in the U.S. Army Air Corps during World War II. In 1941, during his second year of junior college, the government offered the civilian pilot training program, and he wanted to fly. His father was a Navy pilot in World War I, and Bob wanted to follow his father's example and became a pilot. At the age of 20, he completed pilot training, received his commission, and he was assigned to the 351st Bomb Squadron, 100th Bomb Group, out of the Royal Air Force Station, Thorpe Abbotts, England. Because of its high casualty rate, the 100th Bombard Group was better known as the Bloody Hundredth. As part of the 351st Bomb Squadron flying Fortress B-17s, the aircraft he flew was Our Gal Sal. The aircraft got its name by luck of the draw. When the group placed suggested names in the hat, when the name My Gal Sal, the name of a popular song, was pulled from the hat, the crew agreed to change My to Our and name the aircraft Our Gal Sal, stating it belonged to all of them. March 6, 1944 was Bob's 17th mission. This was the Berlin raid. He recalled the day being spectacular and clear enough that he could almost see Berlin from over England. Within what seemed like minutes, Luftwaffe fighters were in their view. German pilots downed or damaged more than 50 of the 100 B-17s. To the credit of Bob's crew, they shot down 2 enemy aircraft, yet their squadron's loss was great, adding to the credibility of them being known as the Bloody 100th. Bob's B-17, Our Gal Sal, was the only one of the 351st Squadron to return to the base. Our Gal Sal completed 125 missions during her time of service. Shoens completed his time in the European theater, and at the command of Major General Curtis LeMay, he was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. Shoens' other medals include the Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters, American Defense Medal, American Campaign Medal, and the European Theater of Operations Medal. He remains active on the speaking circuit, sharing his story and educating others with such humility, stating, "I just did my job."
It's our distinct pleasure to welcome to the stage Mr. Bob Shoens, interviewed by Major Ruth Chappie Seagrass.
Good morning again, and we are humbly honored to have you here with us. And our vocabulary is limited, but the largest word that we know to say is thank you.
Thank you. I've told people this who listen around here that it's my pleasure to be able to tell you what we did, because so few people really know, really understand.
All right. Well, picture this. September 1930. The United States Air Force is now a nation at war. Where is Bob Shoens, and how does he transition into the military?
Well, back up a little bit. I started junior college in the fall of 39 and went through 2 years of junior college, and I knew my draft number was going to come up pretty soon. So I didn't go on to college for that reason and the fact that it was coming out of the Depression, so there wasn't a whole lot of money to send me to college for. So I got a job, and I worked for a company called Vickers Incorporated, which built aircraft parts. I was a parts chaser, which meant I went up to the office and turned in some cars, went downstairs, got some more cars, turned in the cars, and kept back at production. They were producing hydraulic accumulators for V-24s. So one day my mother came home. She was on the draft board. I came home from work, and she called. She said, "You better make up your mind what you're going to do, because your number's coming up." Well, I already knew that wasn't going to be a thing. The first thing I'd always said, and all due respect to the Army, I was not going to plow around the mud with a rifle. But my first desire was Navy, because my dad had been in the Navy. But I wasn't going to ride a battleship or a destroyer. I was going to fly it. So when my mother said my number's coming up, I went downtown Detroit to the recruiting offices and went upstairs and walked in the Navy office, told him I wanted to join the Naval Air Service. He said, "You have 2 years of college credits?" Well, I had dropped 1 credit in college. Sorry. So I went down the hall to the Army Air Forces, and I said, "I want to be in the Air Force." Signed here. And that was the start of my career in the Air Force.
All right, well, tell us about your pilot training.
Well, you heard Bob Wolf talk the other day, and we were comparing notes, and he was called up to active duty in April of '42. I enlisted in April of '42. And then I was called active duty in August of '42. So we're 4 months behind each other, went through all that training together. There are a few different schools in between there, but essentially the same training. I took the Queen Mary over, he flew over, and I ended up in the 100th Bomb Group where he was. So we followed each other around and didn't even know it.
Was the washout rate pretty high in pilot training during that time?
No, I wouldn't call it real high. In fact, all the time I went through primary, basic, and advanced, we lost one crew, or one pilot and instructor pilot.
Okay, well, you all were really smart in the aircraft. We appreciate that. Tell us about aircraft assignment. How did you end up with a B-17?
Because I was told to.
Oh, you
well,
had
the first question came when you went through basic training. Everybody went through the PT-22 and a BT-13 vibrator. You've all heard those terms. Then it was determined whether you're going to single engine school or multi-engine school. And how they determined that, there must have been some reason. I never knew, and maybe the instructors got together and compared notes or something. Anyway, I went to twin engine school, flew AT-17s, a bamboo bomber, was Bob did. And I had a little side trips in what was called an 18-9, which was at that time kind of a hot rod twin engine airplane. They wouldn't even let us fly it alone. We had to have an instructor with us. Anyway, we went through that, and then graduated at Roswell, New Mexico. Got my wings and my bars on my shoulder here. And when we did that, they transferred from advanced training to B-17 transition training. So I stayed right there and went through transition there. Learned to fly the B-17. Then we went on to, of course, we all wanted to back up a little bit. When we got into twin engine school, we all wanted to go to A-20s or B-25s or something like that. That was these 4-engine things. But you didn't have a choice, so you took what you got. Then through phase training, which was supposed to be 3, but they needed pilots and crews so bad it was cut down to 2 or 2.5. Anyway, as phase training, you picked up your crew, you learned to fly formation, and did some more school, on and on and on. Bob flew his own airplane over. We didn't. We got to Kearney, Nebraska, and we got on a train, and we went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, which is across the river from New York. We sat there for 2 weeks, and then one morning they came and got us and put us on 4x6s, and we went over the harbor in New York. And here's this huge monster sitting there, and I looked up and it said Queen Mary up there. Wow, we're going to ride the Queen Mary, and the North Atlantic's infested with submarines. Hot dog. We didn't go across the North Atlantic. We went more south and across and back up. And that thing moves, I'm telling you. We were doing, they said 35 knots. And we broke the record that time. They told us broke the record in 4.5 days. And it was moving. You get up on deck and that thing, you had to hang on. Anyway, we got to, woke up one morning and here's land over here and land over here. Well, this was Ireland and this is England. And here we were. We landed at a place called Greenock, which is the seaport for Edinburgh, or Glasgow. Ironically, my dad in the Navy had landed at Greenock. So it was like I was looking at something he'd been talking about. We got on a train and we went down in southwestern England and we sat in a tent camp for, I think it was over 2 weeks. We got a little muddy at times and things like that, but we got indoctrinated a little bit to English life because we didn't have anything to do. And nearby was a little English town, a village really, and it had a Y-shaped roads like this, and in this Y was a pub. And a pub, if you've been in a pub is a family place. It's the home of a family. So we walked in there and sat down, and we immediately met the father, the mother, and some of the kids, and pretty soon some of the townspeople come in. So we really had a good time that 2 weeks, got indoctrinated into an English life right up front. Which turned out to be kind of amazing when you stop to think the war's going on. Here these people are going about their business like nothing's happening. So after about 2 weeks, I ended up in the 100th Bomb Group, Thorpe Abbotts. And when we got there, we arrived after there had been some pretty good losses at the 100th. So when we went to our barracks, there were 2 crews in a barracks intended for 6. So there are 4 sets of empty beds there. When I say crews, I'm talking about officer crews, up in their own barracks, and the enlisted men were someplace else. The 2 crews were experienced crews, and of course the first thing you do when that situation arises, you start hazing. Boy, you haven't seen it, but you know what flak is. Boy, the next time you watch blah, blah, that went on for several days, and they found out they couldn't scare us, and so they settled down, we settled down. But we didn't fly combat until my first mission was January 4th, 44. We flew a lot of practice missions, and you know, we flew, I said we practiced mission in the States. Well, there was a big difference between practice mission in the States and a practice mission in England. And in the States, you know, kind of, well, I guess in the right place. Over there is get that wing in there, get that wing in there, get that wing in there, get out, back up, back up, back up. So you learn to keep attention. Then, January 4th came our first mission. So that turned out to be a place called, we called the Happy Valley, Flak Alley, we're going to call it, and it was turned out to be a manufacturing plant. I can't think of the name of the town right now. I had to tip my tongue and lost it. Anyway, that was my first mission. We went in relatively low, about 16 or 18,000 feet, just inside Germany. You know the name I'm talking about, Bob, but anyway. Nothing happened. We got shot at with flak a couple times, saw a fighter off the distance, came back, and I thought, boy, made that one, got number 1 in. Can I diverse a little bit?
Sure.
I was going to tell a joke before I started this. This is a poor time to tell a joke, but anyway. And it has been. I told the ball turret gunner here that I was going to talk about ball turret gunners. He said, great. So I want to tell you about my ball turret gunner. He was 6'2", and when he was in the ball, his knees are right here. Well, he had an understanding with the crew. You talked about how to get out of that thing. Well, his understanding was, I'm down here in this turret, I've got 2 guns. And he says, if I see a bunch of parachutes coming out of that airplane, there's going to be a bunch of holes in those parachutes. That's how he got out of the ball turret. Anyway, after the first mission, it wasn't too bad. I hate to say routine, but that looking back, it got to be routine. You go fly a mission, get shot at, and see some flak, things like that.
In 1905, Peter Dresser penned a song. Hear the lyrics. They call her frivolous Sal, a peculiar sort of gal, with a heart that was mellow and all around good fellow was my old pal. My Gal Sal. Mm-hmm. Does that song have any kind of significance to you?
We got a brand new B-17 on about our 6th or 7th mission. When I say brand new, it had no markings on it all except normal aircraft markings. It still had the rubber de-icer boots on it, which were verboten in combat. So our first mission, we flew it that way. When we came back, the crew, and of course the ground crew, wanted to know what we're going to name the airplane. So we all got together and we all dropped a name in the hat. And the navigator dropped in the name My Gal Sal. So we stood around a minute and said, wait a minute, it's Our Gal Sal. That's it.
All right, now you're going to sing it for us. No? Okay.
Right, well, I got to tell you, they took the B-icer boots off after that mission. Everything was made up for combat. Oh, and by the way, the early B-17Gs, I don't know if you're familiar with, were painted. They came off painted just like the E's and the F's. And later on, they came out bare metal. Well, ours was one of the painted ones, one of the early ones. So the cheek guns on the nose kind of stuck out through glass, and a couple other things were carryovers from the F. Our ground crew, and all ground crews, were scavengers. They had a stash of parts in those tents that you wouldn't believe. So the second time we flew that, we had cheek guns on the nose. They had a sheet of armor plate behind the instrument panel. The gunners had a piece of armor plate like this and below the window. I mean, we were ready for battle that second time.
The artwork on Our Gal Sal, what's unique about her? The painting?
Well, the secret was that the rumor went around, it was true, that no bare women on an airplane. Well, ours was painted bare. Sal was painted bare up there. Well, before we even got in it, that was verboten, so they put a negligee on her. The other thing that's unique about it, and this is really rare, Sal was painted on a piece of aircraft canvas and then glued on the airplane. That was rare. And you can tell if you look at the picture, you can see the outline of the canvas on it.
Wow. Tell us about your crew, particularly Ed Stone.
Well, he's the guy, the ball turret gunner, but the other thing he'd like to do, when we were out of the combat area, he'd roll his guns down and stand up and light up a cigar. Sit back there smoking a cigar on the way home.
Now, I understand that he was smoking since the age of 16.
Yeah, something like that. He always smoked cigars. As long as I ever knew him, he smoked cigars.
All righty, good deal. Now, we understand that there are difficult decisions that have to be made by leaders, and sometimes the right decision is the most difficult. We understand that you had to relieve someone of duty during a combat.
I can double that a little bit. One of them in combat situation until he got into combat. My ball turret gunner, which we acquired in the States, once you get a crew, you're stuck with it. I mean, I tried to get rid of this guy. He was a pain in the neck. He was disrupting the crew. He obviously didn't want to fly. And I went to the commander and said, I'd like to get a different ball turret gunner. And he says, not a chance. He's yours. I got to Thorpe Abbotts and flew my first mission. My crew came to me and said, this guy is still a problem. Let's get rid of him. So I went to my commanding officer, Major Turner, and I said, Major, I want a ball turret gunner. He said, what's the matter? I told him. He says, you got it. So that's how I got Ed Stone.
All right. So difficult decisions, but decisions must be made, and that was, you feel that was the right decision for that time.
Yep, and then the other one that you mentioned was, let's see, the Berlin mission, the 17th was a Berlin mission. The third, that was the sixth mission. The fifth one, no, the fourth one was the first time. We took off and we got out over the North Sea about 10 or 11,000 feet, and my bombardier called up on my co-pilot and said there's something wrong with Hansen. So my co-pilot shook me, tapped me on the shoulder and says, listen to what's going on. And I did, and the bombardier was describing him having falling out of his chair and just laying on the floor shaking. So I looked at my co-pilot and I says, go see what the hell's going on down there. So he went down, a few minutes came back up, he says, we better take him home. And I said, what's the matter? He said, he needs a hospital, something going wrong. So we aborted. That was our first time we had a turnaround. So we went home, took Ray Hansen's name, took him home, and he spent a week or 10 days in a psychology ward and in a hospital. And of course, I took him off flight status and reassigned to something else. So when that happened, I came back and they put him down, and I found out he was in the hospital and we weren't going to have him anymore. Well, of course, I had to have a navigator. So we got a navigator from the pool called Greenberg. Well, I'd heard of Greenberg. He was another one of these guys that didn't like to fly. And one of the times I saw him before I got him, he was fill-in for some other crew, and he dropped, when the airplane pulled up to take off, he dropped out of the nose hatch and started doing cartwheels down the runway. Somebody grabbed him, put him in a Jeep, and took him back to the barracks. But somehow he managed to stay in the pool, so when I got him, to my regret, nothing happened, except that when we came back, we were coming across the coast of France, and this guy pipes up and says, I think we're going the wrong direction. And I looked at my compass and I said, we're going west, that's where we're going. When I got back, I told my squadron commander about that incident, and so that was the end of the navigator. So then we had him here for mine. Well, I didn't know at the time, my bombardier spoke up and said, I've had navigation training, I can take care of it. So that's what we decided to do, and we flew the rest of the missions with 9 crew members. We had a bombardier navigator combination.
You make do with what you have. On the 4th of March of 44, was this the aborted mission that you spoke of, or was this another one where Seaton was lost?
You're a little difficult for me to understand for some reason.
On March 4th, you aborted a mission.
Yeah.
Would you talk to us about that one?
March 4th was the second attempt to go to Berlin. No, that's the first attempt I was talking about. The second attempt, we started out for Berlin again, and we ran into weather this time, but it was bad enough to where they called a recall. So all the Air Force except one group turned around. And the commander of that group said later he never heard the recall, which you all thought was baloney. But anyway, they somehow found their way to Berlin, and they ended up being the first group to drop bombs on Berlin. And the gunner on that, top turret gunner on that airplane was the first to shoot down a German airplane over Berlin. At the same time in that group was what we called a composite group, which was made up of some airplanes from 390's group, for example, and some airplanes from the 100th Bomb Group. One airplane was lost, and it was the one from the 100th Bomb Group. It was a guy named Stanley Seaton, who I had gone all the way through training with. And when I was married, when I graduated, he was my best man. Stanley turned out to be a POW, like Bob Wolf, and made it through the war. And he lived in Missouri, and I corresponded with him for a few times. But he died, and that was the end of that. But it wasn't until the third try went to Berlin, March 6, 1944. We took off, and it was just as clear as a bell. You couldn't be, just like out here today. Just you could see for miles and up 25,000 feet. It was just like a road map out there. So we're flying along across France. Everything's wonderful. We get across the border of Germany, and I've heard this later. We didn't know what happened to start with, but later we found out that the lead air division, which had to be the first air division then, had drifted off course, was drifting off course because of wind change, and they hadn't picked it up. We're leading the 3rd Air Division, which is number 2 in line, so we're right up front here. And we're coming to a place in Germany called Dümmer Lake, which is a big orientation point for the Luftwaffe. Well, I guess they were all there that day because they saw this happening on the ground, and as we approached, the whole damn German Air Force was out there, about 120 FW-190s and 109s. And they came at us, like that. First time through, the airplane down there from me, I was up to top squadron, so I could see all this down below me. One of the airplanes down there, the tail was gone, just like that. Another one, the wing was gone. Another one was on fire. Somebody was blowing up over here, just right and left. I'm still sitting here. Out of the corner of my eyes, and my co-pilots looking around out here too, they come around like this, they come out here, and there aren't near as many of them anymore, but there's still a bunch of them. They come at us a third or second time. Some more airplanes go down. I'm still sitting here. Third time they come around, and this time there's maybe a half a dozen of them, and they go through us, and we're still sitting there. Why? I don't know. But we're still sitting there, but we're all by ourselves. There isn't an airplane anywhere near us. The Germans are all gone to go home and refuel and rearm, and our fighters are chasing them. And so up ahead of us, here's a premise. It's obvious and apparent, and one of the criteria, lone B-17 over Germany is a dead B-17. Well, the only reason we weren't, as I said, they went home to refuel and rearm. Up ahead of us 4 or 5 miles was the 95th Bomb Group, part of our 3rd Air Division. So we caught up with them, and when you do this, we all knew there were B-17s captured by the Germans, and they'd fly out here beside us once in a while and report our ground speed and altitude for the anti-aircraft guns. So when we're approaching this 95th Bomb Group, they don't know who we are. I can't stick my hand out the window and wave a flag. And their turrets are going right like this, looking right at us, but we sneak up and idle up to them, and finally they realize we're who we are, I guess. So we rode into Berlin with them. When we got to Berlin, we approached from the southwest corner. We were bombing on the southwest corner, and over here is Berlin, just black with flak. They went into the target, and they turned left, going to go right into all that flak. Well, I'd been shot at enough, so I turned to my co-pilot and I said, is there anybody going home up here? And he said, right up here, you can see a group going the other way. So I said, we're going home. So I took off like this, which is another sticking your neck out thing, so to speak. But we knew that the Germans were not around right now and didn't think they'd have time to come back up after us. We flew around and caught up with that group going home, and that was the 390th Bomb Group, another air division or group of our 3rd Air Division, and we rode home with them. Well, up until that time, we're in combat. There's some airplanes missing somewhere. You don't know whether they've gone home, or they've been shot down, or blew up, or whatever they happened to them. So we rode home. The same thing happened. We caught up with them, the turrets swing around, all this stuff, looking at us, be sure who we are. So we got over the North Sea and we broke off from them and started heading for our own airfield. That's when it dawned on us. It's us. There is nobody. And we got to our airfield, we circled around the land, and here are a whole bunch of hard stands down here that don't have anything on them. We landed and we rolled in the runway and turned off, and along the outside of the field here, the perimeter track, were air crews, ground crews, staying there, group after group after group after group, just standing with their mouth open, looking at us. We're just like, where'd you come from? We taxied into our own hard stand, the guys looked up at us and they just stood there, they couldn't believe it. So we got out and told them, once we knew what happened. And then we went to briefing, but while we're, let's see, something slipped my mind right there. I was going to tell you something about coming across the North Sea. Anyway, went to briefing, or debriefing, and in a briefing room, there's tables sitting around, 10 chairs to each table and 10 little shots with booze. All those tables are empty and all the interrogators are standing waiting for somebody to show up. So as soon as we came in, boy, they just right around us. Oh, the thing I was going to mention was over the North Sea, when we broke off in this other group and started home, we didn't have a scratch on us, maybe a few bullet holes in there, but no major damage. All 4 engines were running, nobody had been hurt. We just went over and came home like nothing happened. And a thought crossed my mind, how am I going to prove that I was even over Berlin? Anyway, we went to briefing, and I soon found out, and everybody else found out what happened. Boy, our crew just lit up, blah, 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 blah. And it was just, the whole story came out right there. But that was the, I hate to say it, the big moment of my career, but it was a pretty big moment nonetheless.
Yes. Can you please tell us about the conversation that you had with your squadron commander, coming back in, seeing that no other aircraft had landed?
When we landed, and of course, as I say, we taxied up to hard stand and shut down and dropped out of our airplane. And we just kind of stood there ourselves, stunned that we were the only ones. And it was traditional for a 4x6 to come along and pick you up and take you to briefing. Well, the 4x6 showed up, and behind us was a Jeep with the squadron commander in it. He waved me over and told me to get in and ride with him. He said, what happened? And I looked at him, and there were big tears rolling down his cheeks, and I turned right around and was doing the same thing. I said, I little Colonel.
Wow. So you're saying the time that it took for a B-17 to fly over Germany in formation, about an hour and a half, 90 minutes, or?
Well, of course, it depends on where you're going, but I think where you're going. I wanted to explain to people, and I don't think anybody, or maybe very few, understand what we're talking about when we say air group and combat wing and 3rd Air Division. So combat group is 21 airplanes stacked like this. The high squadron's up here with 3 elements, so 3 airplanes each, 9. Down here is the lead squadron, there's 2 elements, so 3/8 of 6, and then below that's the low squadron with 2 elements of 6. So you got 12 down here, 9 up here. And they're tilted this way for obvious reasons. When we drop our bombs, we want the bombs up here to miss these guys down here. So it's tilted a little bit. And the combat wing is made up of 3 groups, and they're stacked the same way. You got a lead group, a high group, and a low group. And they're all tilted a little bit too. Then in each air division, to start with, there were 3 combat wings, and that, as the Air Force built up, of course, more wings and more wings and more wings per division. So, and then there were 3 divisions, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So that was the 8th Air Force. And it changed. When Bob Wolf got there, they were having trouble surviving the losses. And as I got there, I started to overcome that a little bit. And what was happening was our operations getting better, but also we're getting more crews and more airplanes. So there's a constant buildup from the time I got there until the war ended. And so one of the things I found is when I talk about when I was there, Bob Wolf before me can tell you a whole different series of stories. The guys after me can tell me some more stories. So it was a constant change in numbers of aircraft, numbers of crews, and tactics. And speaking of tactics, somebody talked about General LeMay the other day, and we all kind of groaned. LeMay and Doolittle came to us before the Berlin raid, sometime in April or March. Somebody out here probably knows better. Anyway, when he came, they decided to change their tactics. Well, up until that time, the fighter squadrons were assigned to a combat wing. So there's always somebody to look up, there's always some fighters looking around up there. Dr. Jefferson talked about that. When LeMay came, they changed that so that the fighters flew up and down the bomber stream. That's something I want to explain too. Flew up and down, on top. You'd look and maybe some coming back here and some going down there. They're always moving. At the same time, there's some down below, catching these Germans taking off or landing. So when they told us this was going to happen, we're going to be up there circling over, so we thought, oh man, now what are we going to do? But it turned out that the tactics were better than what we'd had. Now, a bomber stream, when we went into Germany or any major attack, you had a bomber stream. A bomber stream is made up of the 3 combat wings leading. And then there's a series of combat wings behind them until we run out of airplanes. On the first full-blown Berlin raid, there were 864 bombers in a bomber stream. After the war, I talked to 2 German pilots and their wives, and they were both of them had me on the ground in the area where we were flying over to go to Berlin. One of them lives in Osnabrück, which we flew right over. They told us that bomber stream took 90 minutes to pass. 90 minutes of airplanes going that way. Can you imagine that? You sit here today and watch 90 airplanes go over for an hour and a half. 860 airplanes go over for an hour and a half.
Scary.
Just unbelievable. And then add to that, we had 250 or plus fighters going up and down the stream too.
Your father gave you a book that spoke of beauty in war.
Yeah, I made a mistake one time several years ago telling a friend of mine that there's beauty in war, and she went right through the roof. But I based it on the fact that she mentioned the book. My father brought the book home, All Quiet on the Western Front. That's a story about a guy with a gun in a muddy trench. There's an armistice on while they negotiate the peace. He's sitting there with his rifle across his shoulder and a butterfly coming across here like this. He watched that butterfly and he got up, and when he turned around, it was sitting right out there off the edge of the trench. So he's sticking his hand out. This is a movie. This is why I know what happened in addition to reading it. He stuck his hand out like to try to get the butterfly, and kapow, a German sniper picked him off. It's like that. So when I talk about beauty in war, there's several instances, but one, for example, we'd take off in the morning, on a clear morning, it'd be almost dark on the ground. As you climbed up, the sun and you were both coming up, and you get up there, it's bright sunlight, and here's the North Sea over here sparkling, the white coast of France over here, and the white peaks of Norway are pink in the sunrise. So and then you're going to war. The most important one that I would relate is we went to Bordeaux, France. And we went to as a single group. And Bordeaux, France, is way down in southern France. So we flew down across southern England, the Thames estuary, and here's London sparkling in the sunlight, and over here's the west coast, the sandy coast of France. You almost see people sitting on the beach sunning themselves. We got to the estuary going into Bordeaux, and we started in there, and we had in the lead a brand new general who was on his first mission. So we got to the IP point, and the bomb